This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah.
Do you know how much I paid for this vacation?
All right, welcome back, podcast listeners, to another amazing episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and with me, as always, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. What's going on, bud?
Micah, I'm doing great. Of course, here we are, end of March. Surge meetings are wrapping up, right? We've just gone through an incredible 4 weeks of Surge, delivering a lot of value to clients. And really, Micah, a lot of the industry, as we've been talking to hundreds, thousands of advisors, has also been surging during March. And so now it's kind of time to turn the page to say, all right, I've met with all my clients. I've delivered massive value. My team still has a lot of work to do because a lot of action items come out of these meetings. But now as the advisor, as the owner, what happens next?
Now, Jarvis, the other thing that I want to bring up, I think this is the last week that you can sign up, at least this quarter, for our Backstage Pass and Invictus membership. So if you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for the love of Pete? Yeah. But if you're really serious about improving your practice, this is the reason that we have developed this system and program. And if you like the podcast, you're going to love the content that we have inside of there. But Jarvis, you are correct. We're wrapping up Surge, which is great. Your and I's journey on how Surge was created was different. But the concept of it was the same, is we need to say, hey, how do we focus our time to deliver the most value to our clients we can, then be able to make a hard stop and be able to pivot and do something else, whether that's spending time with the family, whether it's working on the next project, whether that's doing another thing. And in fact, I just got a great testimonial from an advisor. He is looking at changing broker dealers. And it was something that kind of came up and we were chit-chatting about it a little bit. And he just sent me a message out of the blue and said, Micah, I really got to thank you. I've been listening to your guys' stuff. You know, I've known him for kind of 6 years. I've been listening to your stuff for a long time, and I just recently implemented Surge. And if I hadn't had implemented Surge, I wouldn't have the bandwidth to deal with the BD change I need to go through right now. And I just want to say thank you for that. And of course, I said, well, why didn't you listen to me 6 years ago? No, I said, you're welcome, right? It's great stuff that's there, but that's the power of Surge. But I think the illusion can be, Jarvis, just because we got out of that high intensity work that we just had, that we got to pivot to a next high intensity activity, which is like changing BDs or changing things. And while that's something you could do, the other option is go spend time with your family.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the spending time with family, while on paper sounds easiest, for a lot of us, that can really be a struggle.
Yes.
And there can be a lot of guilt and shame and shoulds around this, and we don't like to spend a lot of time there. What we like to spend time around is results. So, Mike, I'd really love today to tackle this from two angles. One, how do you make that family time really quality time, aka you're not moping around saying, hey, do you know how much I paid for this vacation? And then kind of item number two, how do you keep your team from panicking, from not being productive, whatever the case may be? So I'd love to cover it really from a personal side and a professional side.
So my kids will ask me from time to time, because they'll all say, when they say, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, they're like, well, do we get to do it or are we going to do it? Right. I mean, that was the only question.
That's your mindset. You decide. That's
your mindset. And the other part that they sometimes will say, well, is this going to be fun or is this mandatory fun? It's like, well, again, this is your mindset, but these are the activities we're going down. But how do you like shift gears? I guess that's the first thing I want to talk about, is shifting gears from high octane mode of me coming into the office, me running 7 to 8 client meetings a day, my staff running out and doing everything that I need them to do and I'm asking them to do, then pivoting back to being a husband and a father. And that's a gear shift. I mean, that is a change in pace in many things. Because even though I went through Surge and the family was with me going through Surge in that aspect, they weren't at that same high intensity level. And so I got to do a couple of things. Is one, I got to have a buffer week, Jarvis, is if I go directly from Surge into, hey, I'm going to be this idyllic father, whatever that means, for this next week, boy, that is a rough start, right? Like I'm still up at 5 a.m. Then it's like 5:02. I'm like, why the hell isn't the family up? Like, let's go do things, right? And I'm totally disrupting their day, and I'm not being a good husband. I'm not being a good father. So now I know I got to plan a buffer week that's going to take me to transition, to change gears, so then I can get more into that second week of really being more present with the family. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. And something that I learned from you, Micah, I hate to give you compliments here, but something I learned from you was there's this idea, and Dan Sullivan, who I'm a big fan of, he talks about free days, that you should have these 24-hour periods where ideally you're not even thinking about work. Now, there may be some entrepreneur somewhere that's done that, and power to them. For me, what I discovered, Mike, is I would spend half of my energy during the day trying not to think about work. So I just would, right? So I was like, oh, I'm thinking about work. You know what? Not think about work. It's like, don't think about pink elephants. It doesn't really work.
Right.
And so something I know that you do is in the mornings, you'll say, boy, before the kids get up or up until this time, that's when I'll do work. I do something similar, and then I'll just keep a little notepad with me or notes on my phone. And as business ideas come up, I'll give them a place to live. That way I can say, oh, great, I have this place for this to live, but I'm not going to spend my day fighting that away.
And the other thing is, and I know you do this as well, I explain this to my wife, Kelly, and to my kids, right?
Yes.
Because when we're talking, all of a sudden this business idea comes in. It's almost like a client's question. When you're in a client meeting, you can see the question come across their face, and they can't stop but thinking about that, and they just want to blurt it out, and they're not listening to a bloody thing you're saying. Alas, I am the same way. And so, when we're talking and I'm in that mode with family, sometimes I gotta say, hey, I am so sorry. This thought just came across. I got to write it down because I want to pay attention to you. But if I don't deal with this, I'm not going to listen to a bloody thing that you're saying. And so they're very patient with me. I'll go back, I'll shoot a quick message, a text message, or whatever it is to the team to have them do something. Then I can shut it down and I can turn back around to the family. But now mentally that's checked. And when I tried suppressing that and saying, well, that's just, I'm not prioritizing my family because my thoughts are here. And if I was really a good husband and a good father, then I would be able to mentally prioritize them and not think about business. That just didn't work for me.
Yeah, now this exists on a spectrum because it'd be easy to tell yourself, well, Matt's putting notes on his phone and Micah's taking things to his office. This is not the same as you're getting alerts on your phone. You're getting calls from your office. You're getting messages from your office. You're checking emails. That is not the same. That is an absolute fail. That does not, one that doesn't belong in normal life, period. Even during surge should not belong. But you being glued to your phone, me being glued to my phone, that is not vacation time. So yes, there needs to be an outlet for that. That cannot be a crutch or an excuse.
All right. So this is a little bit maybe of a Micah rant here. So Jarvis, I'm really thinking about in my house so my kids don't have phones, right? We have devices that they use on airplanes when we're traveling, but they don't get.
Now, for those of you that are curious, it's not because Mike is so distant in the Alaska tundra that there are not phones. It was a voluntary choice. I have checked. There is internet reception.
There is.
Not good, but there is.
There is. Thank you, Elon, right? Yes. So there's internet up here. So, but no, I don't like them on the technology and devices, right? We have a limited time for that. Gabe's doing work now for TPR, which is pretty fun. So he's doing a lot of cool stuff there. So there's some limited time that he can work. But other than that, we shut off devices. But then when their friends come over, and we found this last night, like their friends were busting out cell phones and playing on their cell phones. And I think I'm going to have a no phone policy for any child in my house. That if you have a phone, you're going to put it in a Faraday bag and we're going to zip that thing up and you don't get access to it while you're in my house. And if you need to get on your phone, get out of my house. Maybe that's going a little too extreme, but the notifications, the distractions, all that's going on, I really think robs from the quality time. So sorry, it's a little bit of a rant that's there on kids with phones.
No, I don't think so. Because we have several advisor friends. I don't want to name them here because they haven't shared it publicly. That they will leave their phone in their car, so they never take their phone into their house. I have friends that when they get home, they turn their phone completely powered off, and they don't power it on the next morning for that same reason. Just that lure, that dopamine hit of electronics is too much. So that could be the case for your vacation. You might just say, "Listen, I just haven't figured out how to physically ignore my phone. Great, I will not take my phone on vacation." You'll survive, by the way. We all did for thousands of years. You'll survive. But yes, you've got to just look and say, hey, whatever's taking me away from my quality time, I've got to either willpower it or forcing mechanism it away.
So sometimes when Kelly and I will go out on date nights, we'll leave phones. And I got to say, you feel naked, by the way, if you haven't done this. If it's worse than not bringing your wallet, right? I mean, you're constantly checking for it. You feel completely naked, not having the phone. And it's this constant fear of, oh my gosh, what if something happens? Then you have to remind yourself that for the most of us listening to the podcast, most of our lives were without phones. It's coming the other direction now, but most of our lives, at least growing up, were without phones, and we survived just fine. So it's okay to let go of that. And we have to remember that when we're transitioning to family time as well.
Another piece on the personal side, and this is something I've struggled with for years, but some recent extreme accountability has really helped, is playing the martyr card. And we joked about it on the intro quote, hey, do you know how much I paid for this vacation? Or, hey, we really need to work. Or do you know how much all these martyr things, whether you say them or you internalize them, those are extremely damaging to your psyche, to your family, to your relationship. And so when those things crop up, you've got to figure out how to work them back out of your life. For me, Mike, it was some very extreme accountability on that subject that you're quite aware of. In fact, I almost slipped on it the other day, and I caught myself as I envisioned the consequence of that extreme accountability. Those of you that are going to be at our May mastermind, our Invictus mastermind, I'll tell you about that because we'll do extreme accountability there as well. But that's what it took for me. And again, Micah, you know the details of that. Yeah. But it took some very extreme accountability for me to stop playing that martyr card when traveling with my family.
Yeah, and that's really important, right? And that's what extreme accountability is, not just putting us in an uncomfortable space just to be uncomfortable. Yes, that is a benefit of it, quite frankly, but it's to make those massive improvements and leap. All right, so Jarvis, so we wrapped up Surge. We talked about a little bit of a transition week that's there. Then it really comes to what's your perfect calendar look like? And this is one where I really think that you need to involve your spouse at, right? Get with your wife and go through and say, how does this setup work? What does that ideal life look like? So example for me, right? If I just get up and I said, hey, well, I'm going to do all my work before my kids wake up. Then when they wake up, I'm going to get and do stuff. And guess what? I've disrupted family life because we homeschool. So my wife wants time to homeschool. She wants time to do these other things. So that doesn't work inside of there. So her and I are constantly chatting about the calendar, about what's going to work, like little Lego boxes or like Tetris, right? How do we fit this in? And my goal is to be a great husband and a great father. Now I need to work. So I got to have Surge in order to fill that. I got to have time outside of Surge for mini Surges and other things that are going to come up. So we got to fill those things, right? So I can make sure I'm providing for my family, but then I also need to be there for my family. So what activities and adventures do we want to do? And where this blows up for me, Jarvis, is when I don't have a running list of things. And this is whenever I'm doing something, I can think of 12 other things that we could be doing. But when I'm not doing something, I can't think of anything fun to go do.
Not a darn thing. It's got complete blank.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like staring at a blank wall. It's like, I got nothing. So I got to create this running list. And so I've almost found
Micah,
that
sorry to interrupt here, but the other place this blows up, not having a list, is when my list runs to zero, I start looking around the house for things that are broken. Right. Even if, by the way, if it's a vacation house, like, you know what, why is this hinge squeaky here? This is ridiculous. I got to call the maintenance guy. We're going to take care of this thing. And so I think you've got to know that, hey, when my list runs to zero, I create problems. And so I love this idea of let me keep a running list. Mine can be a running list as silly as, hey, go change the tires on my dirt bike. I mean, if I'm out of things to do, I'm going to go change my dirt bike tires.
Yeah. Replace the batteries in your optics, right? Clean your guns, right? All of these other things that you could be doing, which are just fantastic. So, but you got to have those list of things to do to stay productive. The other thing that I'm guilty of, Jarvis, so if it's not nitpicking on other things, I'll just jump back into work mode. Okay, yes. Well, I can jump back into work mode and I can then play Office generally, but I can do other things in work. And by the way, that just is me nitpicking about my team and what they're doing, which is not hyper productive, but I could get into that mode there. But now, again, that's taken away from my goal, which was, again, being a great husband and a great father, which is what I'm trying to do. So I really got to be intentional about that time. And then know that we're human, right? And know that what works for me isn't going to exactly work for you or exactly work for Jarvis. So you got to figure out what's going to work for you and your spouse.
Yeah, and it really goes back to one of those key tenets of the Perfect RIA, right? Be intentional, do what works. And communicate with that with your spouse, right? Jackie, my wife, knows that, hey, when we're on vacation, if we're traveling somewhere, I need physical adventures. I need to go mountain biking, I need to go dirt biking. And so she kind of keeps her own list and she's kind of just watching, keeping pulse. I know Kelly does this. And she'll say, hey, Matthew, you know what you need to do? Is there a mountain bike place in town? Yeah, I'm not really feeling like mountain biking. I know, but why don't you go do it anyway? Okay. So we can get caught up in the should, like, hey, I should sit by the pool with the kids for 8 hours. And that just doesn't work for me. If instead I go mountain bike for a couple hours and then I come back, I can be a quality husband, quality dad. That really makes a difference in my life.
Very much so. So by the time this airs, because we're stocking these up in advance, because I'm going to Israel here soon, and that's actually one of the conversations that Kelly and I've had because we're going on a group tour. And this last week, we're on when we were in Hawaii, I should say, we were on a bit of a group tour doing the Pearl Harbor stuff. And boy, that didn't go over well with me. And it was only a couple hours. I'm like, why do I have to sit in this line? Why do I have to follow your instructions? This should be more efficient, right? And I started nitpicking on all this other stuff. So one of the things I talked about with my coach, and I'm also talking about with Kel, I was saying, hey, look, I need a list of things that I can do while on that group tour, because me staying engaged in a group tour for 10 days, that's just not my personality. And I don't want to take away from the rest of the group, because I would be that guy. So I don't want to take away from the rest of the group, and I don't want to put my wife in a comfortable position. And so I would say, great, I need to come up with activities that are there. So you could look at this and say, well, Micah, wow, you're a pretty crappy father that you can't be engaged for 10 days and doing this activity. And that could be one way to view it.
That is a way to look at it. Yeah.
Correct. And the way I'm going to choose to look at it is just saying, you know what? I know I have flaws and I need to work within those in order to be the best dad I can be. And it's something that I'm striving to. So that's the approach we're going to take.
Yeah, again, it's be intentional, right? If you're saying, hey, every time I go on vacation after 3 days, I'm a real grump to be around, then know that in advance. A lot of advisors I talk to say, hey, after 3 days of vacation, I turn into a real grump. Cool. Then limit vacations to 3 days or find a way to step away and recharge in whatever it is you need to get back on your A game.
Yeah, a great way to do that, Jarvis, is renting office space. I did this for a long time. Is we'd go on an extended office, extended 6-week vacation somewhere, and I'd be like, great, here's the times that I'm just going to go rent an office space, and I'm just going to go work for 5 or 6 hours, regardless if there's stuff that I need to do or not. I feel like I haven't been connected, I haven't been plugged in, and I need to be back there. And also, my team is like, when can we get a hold of you? And I pre-schedule those times. So you know what? Sometimes you're going to use a virtual office place for that. I'm out of the Starbuckses; those aren't super productive for me. More the Regis spaces are generally okay. I wouldn't do client meetings there, but I would absolutely show up there to do some work, to get some private space and more of that work time. Physical activity is another big one.
I had a punch stamped in my millennial card. I used a WeWork space recently. It was actually really nice. So make sure you get a conference room and not like they'll have chairs next to the coffee stand, but you get a full conference room. Micah, let's pivot this to the professional side. You and I both take extended time out of the office, including time completely off the grid. You every year go to Moose Camp. You're off the grid for several weeks. We did a trip down the Grand Canyon last year. We were off the grid for 2 weeks. Let's talk about this from a professional, from a team standpoint. I would suspect your team is used to this by now, but I know my team, whenever I'm going to be completely off the grid, they say, wait a second, I can tell there's like this fear, like the building's going to catch on fire while I'm gone and I'm the only one that knows how to use a fire extinguisher.
You know, and sometimes it'll funny what comes up right before then is they'll come to you for things that they think only you can do, that you're like, you haven't come to me for this thing for like the last 11 months. Why now? Right. So it creates this, oh my gosh, he's going away and I won't be able to get a hold of him. I need some Micah time. Right. And so we got to create a good rule set, and we got to start off with fear setting when we're talking about these trips. And so one of the things that I love to do, and Jarvis, I know you do this as well, is you meet with your team and you say, great, what are the things that you're concerned about with me being unplugged for this 2 weeks, this 3-week period in time, et cetera. And the hardest thing that I still have an issue with is validating their concerns, because immediately they say, well, I'm concerned about XYZ. That's a stupid idea. Has that ever happened? Right?
Has that ever happened?
You know, but that's not what this exercise is. It's about finding out what their fears are. So we find out what their fears are, and then we outline them, and then we come up with an action plan. If that happens, what would you do to a place that they are comfortable?
That's right. This is not about debunking their fears.
Right.
It's about saying, to Mike, to your point, all right, well, I'm worried that there's going to be an SEC audit. Perfect. Okay, cool. Let's write down, if the SEC walks in with guns drawn the day after I leave, don't tell them where I went. No, here's the checklist, right? Or, you know, a lot of them is, what if a client needs to come in? What if a client dies? What if a client needs money? Perfect. Let's walk through these and let's walk through the scripts in a way that you're comfortable with, and we'll kind of go through this checklist.
You know, another thing to do is reach out to clients in advance, let them know you're going to unplug.
Yes.
You know, it's a great idea to do that, especially anytime we're going international. I also reach out to clients and I let them know that we're going to be out of the country for a period in time, just because it's not going to be normal communication standards, right, versus other vacations. But if I'm going to Moose Camp, which all my clients know, I let all my new clients know. We communicate with all my clients that I'm headed out to Moose Camp, and I'll be out of pocket. I'll have a sat phone if there is a 911 emergency that could come up, right? But besides that, I'm out of pocket. So the other thing is, so you got fear setting. The other thing, Jarvis, I want to talk about is outlining what needs to be done. Because the other thing I'm guilty of, I'm going to come back after 3 weeks of Moose Camp and I'm like, hey, I want to get back to work. And I'm going to start pulling threads in order to find that nothing was done. Now, there could have been a million things done, but I'm going to look for the things that weren't done to really focus on. So I need to be clear for Micah that I'm outlining what the team's going to do and what's measurable success. The team needs to know what that is. And then that's the only list I can compare to when I come back. And I got to hold myself to that one. And I need the team's help at that one, because I'll find things that aren't on that list. This is, why didn't you do this? Well, it's because you never asked us to do that.
You never said that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's sort of different approaches to this, right? One is just like, hey, don't let the building burn down while I'm gone. Just be reactive. Take care of whatever happens. Don't let the building burn down. And if that's the way you left on vacation, then again, Micah, to your point, that's what you need to have as expectation when you came back. All right, the building's still here. No clients quit. All right, fine. But if my expectation, which it is that the office should actually be better when I came back than when I left, then to your point, I really need to clearly outline in quantifiable measurements what that looks like.
It's a Boy Scout standard, right? Leave it better than when you found it. So
that's right.
You got
It's obvious to you and I, but not everybody else.
So you got to put projects in place. So that's great project time. So that means in advance, I need to be talking to the team. What projects do they need to do in this set of time? Are we going to update some content in the CRM? We're going to get ready for a value add. Are we going to use a new software, right? What projects are out there? Are we just doing surge prep? That's still a great project they can work on. What are those? Define success in writing with measurable results. Be ready for surge. Unfortunately, is not a measurable result. I wish it was. Nope. I need to break those steps down. Prepare the next value add is not a measurable result. I need to break it down. What is that value add? To what clients is it going to go to? What's an acceptable outcome that says? What data needs to be in there, right? We got to work with the team in that. Then they have clear marching orders that I can grade them by, so to speak, when I come back.
Now, when you are out of office but not off the grid, this is probably the hardest time, right? Once you're off the grid, you're off the grid. And it's just your headspace that you have to worry about until you come back on the grid. When you're on the grid, you need to have clear scheduled times when you're going to communicate with the team, and all other times are no communication short of the building literally being on fire. Otherwise, and my team, Mike, I know you do something similar. I check in with my team at least once a week on Wednesdays. Depending on what's going on, we might say, hey, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll check in at 9 o'clock. Here's where the list is going to live. I have 15 minutes and we're going to run through the list. That way the team has an outlet. By the way, this works when you're in the office too. But when you're out, here's where you're going to put your questions. I will come on for 15 minutes and I will answer those questions. Otherwise, it's instant messages, it's emails, it's calls. Micah, back to your early example, for things that they normally would take care of. Hey, Jane and Sue called and asked for $10,000. And it's set aside in their account. Well, yeah, but I just want why are you calling me? So it needs a place to live.
I'm so laughing because that happened yesterday. I got a text from my office on a client a text, by the way. And so when I saw it, because my phone's always on D&D and they're not added to my favorites list. And then I saw it and responded, is this 911? That's my only response when it comes back. When the office texts me, my immediate response is this 911?
And tell me they need the money for ransom. Tell me that the reason you're texting me is because it's ransom money. In which case, thank you for texting me.
Fantastic.
It's for vacation.
Fantastic. Yes. And that it was, no, it's not. I just need clarification on this. And so what happens was their supervisor was out, is out on vacation. And so they feel alone. And because of that, now they're reaching out directly to me. But even in those times, it's still not okay for me to break the chain of a process and says, is this in our process? And their answer is no. Great. Follow our process. And I'm not answering their friggin' question via text. And that's challenging, Jarvis, because I just want to be the go-to and answer that question. But once I do it, I've now opened that floodgate up. So you got to go back. Is this a 911? No. Are you following our process? No. Follow our process. And then we're going to go and answer the question appropriately.
Yeah, just like parenting, it's 10 times as much work to be a good leader than it is to be a bad leader. It's very easy to just say, well, great, you called me, I'll answer this, no big deal. It is very difficult to say, no, this is not a 911. I will talk to you on Thursday in our scheduled time. Please put it on the list. Make sure it's linked to the CRM. Thank you. Have a nice day.
So, Jarvis, I'm convinced it's 10 times harder in that moment. It's 1,000 times easier in the long run. You being a lazy leader creates so much work for you and your team in the long run. That price is so much greater that you have to pay later. You're just choosing to defer to pay the piper, and that's a huge price. I would rather deal with that right now as a great leader and then move on. And so our team is always efficient.
I like that. No, that's very true, right? Especially in parenting as well, right? You're going to pay the price, and you're going to pay it 100x later than just paying it now.
Yep.
So pay the price now.
Speaking of paying the price.
Yes, speaking of paying the price, this podcast is all about action because it's only the things that you do that count. Micah, action item number 1, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, join the Backstage Pass and Invictus. Right. What we talk about in the podcast is just scratching the surface of the processes, the checklists, the templates, even our out of office checklists and the scripts that the team uses. All of that can be found inside of our member portal.
I love it. Build your morning success ritual. There's in-surge rituals is different than my out-of-surge ritual. What does your morning success ritual look like? And make sure you're communicating that with your family so you're setting up for optimal success, being hyper-intentional.
Action item number 3 for our Invictus members, please join us in May for our mastermind. And then, of course, in September for the entire nation, we will be hosting a TPR live event.
Super excited.
The end of September. So registration will open soon for that. Micah, I would say last on my list, this took me years to learn, is make sure, and you mentioned this daily success ritual, you need to have, you have to have a daily success ritual for your days out of the office. You can muscle through it and just work extra hard because you get so much kind of dopamine from the work. But when it's family time, that daily success ritual is 10 times as important.
Amen. Amen. Jarvis, is always a blast. Until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.